G'day guys and gal. Hypotheticals within Warhammer 40k are always a bit of fun. What happens if the Emperor dies? What if Sanguinius fell to Chaos instead of Horus? What if I enjoy getting pegged? With so much lore to draw from, there have been so many butterfly moments within 40k, actions and decisions that decided the outcome of the Horus heresy and the current state of the galaxy. One of these moments was the death of Ferrus Manus, the first Primarch to ever die. Ferrus was not the weakest of the Primarchs, far from it. He was favoured by the Emperor, Gilliam enlisted him amongst his top 3 Primarchs, and Horus literally complains to Ferrus's skull that if he had him instead of the broken retards on his side, then the heresy would be a walk in the park. So that begs the question, what if Ferrus survived the Isstvan drop site massacre? What if he escapes with the likes of Ironfather Wayland and Majorkill? How would things change? Before we get started, the major minis are my pride and joy. I get so much satisfaction and happiness from the producing of them with the model art, to the printing and shipping them, to then seeing the awesome way you guys and gals paint them. But unfortunately, due to reasons, the Space Lion squad alongside the Space Lion Sergeant are to be delisted in 24 hours. This model will never return. In good news though, the Lord of the Night will stay listed, for now. I've put a 20% discount on the Space Lions as well as their Sergeant to make it a bit easier to clear these bad boys out. Link is in the description below. Today we'll go over what would have happened if Ferrus survived the Isstvan drop site massacre. We will start with the things that almost definitely would have occurred, and then using my vast and sad extensive knowledge of 40k lore, we will attempt to craft a realistic and likely outcome that could have occurred. Let's get into it. Before we get into the what ifs, we need to understand the context of Ferrus's death and why he was the only loyalist Primarch on Isstvan to die. 3 loyalist Primarchs were sent into the trap: Vulcan, Corvus, and Ferrus. When the trap was sprung, that trap being the Alpha Legion Iron Warriors, Wordbearers, and Night Lords revealing their loyalty to Horus by gunning down the true loyalists from behind, a lot of chaotic shit happened. Corvus was able to cut through enemy lines and lead a few thousand of his Raven Guard to safety. The Salamanders were massacred with very few surviving. Vulcan entered a rage and was eventually incapacitated with a tactical nuke. He survived as it was revealed that he was an unkillable perpetual and could regenerate from any wound, thus he was captured instead. However, Ferrus was so consumed by his need to kill Fulgrim that he had charged his iron hands way too deep into enemy lines. There would be no fighting to safety for him. He was then killed by the chaos-empowered Fulgrim via a cheeky decapitation. However, if Ferrus had a cooler head, he probably wouldn't have lost it. But his mistake was continuing to charge into enemy lines whilst the Salamanders and Raven Guard retreated to resupply. If he had instead put aside his rage and did a slow withdrawal to cover his allies' rear, then he would have been in a much better position for when the trap was sprung. Quite a lot of Iron Hands escaped the massacre in the lore, a few thousand in various different ships. They weren't cum blasted in the face by the secret traders like the Raven Guard and Salamanders were. Sure, they were bogged down in Emperor's children, but a decent amount were able to fight clear and escape. After all, Iron Hands are extremely hard to kill or stop. So if Ferrus withdrew with his warriors and then fought through enemy forces to reach their ships when the trap was sprung, he likely would have escaped on the same ship with Majorkill, Wayland, Atash Tarsa, and other heroes of the Shattered Legion got on. His legendary first captain Gabriel Santor also probably would have escaped alongside many of the elite Morlock Terminators. This was the ship that almost assassinated Fulgrim and fucked Fulgrim's plan around during the events of Angel Exterminatus. In canon, this ship ended up sabotaging and ambushing various traitor ships before stealthily tracking Fulgrim and Perturabo, with Shuriken shooting Fulgrim in the head with a sniper rifle. However, with Ferrus in command, he would spend a lot more time gathering the survivors to him to create a small fleet as opposed to a single ship. He would strike back at spicier traitor targets or even fleets, reaping a much greater toll. More than likely, he would also travel back to Medusa to resupply, repair, and rearm, as well as gather more warriors to him. A similar thing to what Corvus did. Where it gets really interesting though is the fact that Fulgrim would never feel the immense guilt and horror at killing Ferrus. The guilt and horror that allowed the demon to possess Fulgrim, which in turn corrupted Fulgrim to chaos by the time he wrestled back control from the demon. Sure, he would still have the demon messing with his mind, but he wouldn't have plunged into full rapist demon mode like he did in canon. As such, the events of Angel Exterminatus don't take place, since it would take months or even years, if ever, for the demon to break down Fulgrim's will enough to possess him. By that point, Horus wouldn't allow Fulgrim to fuck off on his side quest to become an 8-titty drag queen, as the Siege of Terror would be about to begin. There is also a chance Fulgrim would eventually overcome the will of the demon and free himself of its influence, potentially opening up a Fulgrim redemption plotline as he realizes how much of a fool he has been. Either way, with Fulgrim slowing or even stopping his decline, the Emperor's children's decline would also slow, although by the time of the Dropsite Massacre they were too far gone already. Ferrus would still be desperate to kill Fulgrim, however this time he would have the time to gather the survivors of the Shattered Legions, including some Salamander and Raven Guard forces. He would prove to be a massive thorn in Horus's side, just as, if not more painful than Corvus. Horus in turn would likely send Fulgrim and the Emperor's children to take down Ferrus once and for all. This is where it gets a bit more difficult to say what would happen, but fuck it, let's do it anyway. This conflict between the weakened Iron Hands and the much larger Emperor's Children Legion would be a conflict in its own right, in a similar vein to the Dark Angels and the Night Lords conflict during the Thramis Crusade. Ferrus would use his incredible resourcefulness and ruthless determination to counter the wild and wacky Emperor's Children Legion. His goal would be to more or less break up the Emperor's Children forces and fleet through a series of skirmishes in order to create an opening for him to directly strike at Fulgrim and his flagship. You could argue that Ferrus would instead head to Terra and fortify it with Dawn, but I believe that Ferrus's hot head and burning desire for vengeance would ensure that he would either come to Terra holding Fulgrim's head, or he wouldn't come at all. The opportunity for Ferrus to strike would arrive, but more so from Fulgrim creating an opening for Ferrus to teleport onto his flagship, the Pride of the Emperor, to have their epic showdown. Fulgrim loves a bit of theatre. Ferrus teleports aboard with his Morlock Terminators, all of them kitted with new custom weapons and armor made by Ferrus himself. The Iron Hands Primarch knows that they will be outnumbered and outgunned, so he spends some time evening the odds. They carve their way through the ship, butchering crew and Emperor's children alike. Eventually, they arrive at the Maraviglia, the birthplace of the Emperor's children's true corruption, as this was the place that Bekhor Kinska accidentally summoned demons during her obscene performance and damned the Legion's soul. Fulgrim is decked out in his warplate, wielding Forgebreaker and the Layer Blade, just like he was at Isstvan. Ferrus is wielding Fireblade, ignited with his rage. Ferrus stands with his Morlocks, and let's say Sharakin is still with them. Fulgrim with his Phoenix Guard as well as his captains, including Marius Verosian, Julius Caesarion, Lucius, and the other creepy fucks. In this hypothetical, we will say that Fulgrim never overcame the Layer Blade and has fallen deeper into insanity, however was never possessed by the demon, who still resides within the blade. The time for waiting is over. After one of those classic angsty Primarch arguments where Fulgrim calls Ferrus a closed-minded fool that doesn't appreciate a good blood orgy, with Ferrus then calling Fulgrim a creepy cringelord, the two forces charge. The Iron Hands are outnumbered, but their conviction is unmatched, and their war gear miles beyond the Emperor's children. They smash into each other's lines, Ceramite on Ceramite, the Iron Hands charge, pushing back the Phoenix Guard. Marius and his Noise Marines devastate the Morlocks at such close range. However, with the fighting being so intertwined, they can't get clean shots without killing their own. As in canon, the Iron Hand Morlock Ignatius Newman is able to approach Marius and his warriors, blasting them with his heavy bolter. He's able to do this due to him being deafened by them on Isstvan, thus immune to their noise-based weapons. Gabriel Santa engages Julius Caesarion in battle, first captain against first captain. Just like in canon, Santa gets the upper hand, but his passion and rage of betrayal has cooled into cold, empty hate. Instead of hesitating, which allowed Julius to kill him in canon, he knocks Julius to the ground and butchers him. As in canon, Lucius fights Sharakin, and just like canon, is killed by him, finally encountering a swordsman greater than he. Ferrus and Fulgrim clash weapons. In canon, Ferrus is so blinded by rage when he saw the trap the traitors had sprung on Isstvan that Fulgrim was able to get the upper hand on him. He also didn't expect the strength Fulgrim got from the demon within the blade. In this version, he still probably wouldn't be as aware of the demon buff, but he also wouldn't be so careless. Regardless of how the duel goes, it's pretty much guaranteed both Primarchs would die here. If Ferrus kills Fulgrim, then he would eventually be taken down by the Emperor's Children Legion, more than likely by buying time for Sharakin and his Morlocks to escape. If Fulgrim kills Ferrus, you bet your ass Ferrus has stuck a nuclear charge in his power pack that would then atomize the ship and Fulgrim in a heartbeat. With Fulgrim dead, their key captains gone, and their flagship severely damaged or even destroyed, the Emperor's children would truly lose the plot. Their shattering into rogue warbands would happen here instead of post-heresy, with some returning to Horus to attack Terra, but many more attempting to fight and kill the Iron Hands. The Iron Hands would likewise be shattered with the death of Ferrus, but they would do much better off knowing he took Fulgrim with him to the grave, and many more Iron Hands, including the senior Morlocks, would still be alive and able to lead the remnants of the Legion. Either way, an overall win for the Imperium, as Fulgrim and the bulk of the Emperor's Children forces would be absent from the Siege of Terra. I can't say for sure that this would end up changing the result of the heresy though. After all, the Emperor's children were pretty useless in the siege. Fulgrim got his ass whooped by Rogel, and his warriors got bored and ended up raping and pillaging the world's population. Not an ideal situation for the citizens of Terra, but overall of little consequence to the siege. An unintended side effect of Fulgrim's premature death may be the mental state of Perturabo. Perturabo was deeply disturbed and upset by the events of Angel Exterminatus, where Fulgrim betrayed him and tried to kill him. In the version of events where Ferrus survives Isstvan, there is no Angel Exterminatus. This may result in Perturabo staying at the siege of Terra till the end, as he wouldn't have to be fighting side by side with a bunch of debaucherous degenerates that try to kill him. However, this is a bit of a stretch, and Perturabo still would have been sick of Horus and his demonic brothers. So overall, not actually that much of a change. Canon Fulgrim has done fuck all for 10,000 years, only appearing once to get clapped by Rylanor. Him being dead would barely affect the setting or key plotline outcomes. Ferrus would also end up dead just like in canon. However, by having this extra lore, there's a decent chance the Iron Hands would be a bit more front and center, as opposed to the extremely shafted sub-faction they have become. I just really want Fulgrim and the Emperor's children to get what's coming to them, because it's wildly overdue. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then buy a Major Mini. Only 24 hours till the space lines are gone for good. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more hypothetical content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.